Hey guys, this is Joe Carvin with CSFAB here in West Fargo. We have quite a bit of experience with the '09 to '13 Indian Kings Mountain generation, and as they've gotten older, we've discovered, you know, issues that have been more major. What we have here is a problem that a lot of people aren't aware of because it's a out of sight, out of mind situation. Um, what I have in front of you is a complete transmission from an '09, a transmission shaft from an '09, and a rebuilt transmission cassette assembly. The reason why I want to show you this, though, is there's three major things we're going to hit on here. I'm going to start with explaining what the failure is. The problem that we have is that the Indian clutch is actually too soft. The splines on the inside are too soft. So what happens is over time, the clutch splines will wear and break down, and they can fail in two ways. One, you get excessive rock of the clutch basket, which some of you may have seen videos of or people talking about already. The other thing that it leads to is damage of the main shaft. If you catch it early, you can replace the clutch. I don't recommend the Indian clutch, but we'll talk about that more later. And you can save the main shaft. Now, it's simple enough to replace the main shaft. It is quite a bit of labor to disassemble the transmission, press it all apart, and put in a new main shaft, put it all back together. It does require essentially a complete transmission rebuild kit, new bearings, seals, gaskets, and of course the shaft. The problem is that though these transmissions were built by Baker, Indian has specific requirements for their transmission shafts. They kept the spline pattern, threads, length, everything the same as Harley, except the diameter of the shaft that rides on the inner primary bearing. The reason why Indian changed this, and it's this dimension here. I hope you guys can see this okay. With this dimension here is where the problem is. So where the bearings ride here and here, I hope you guys can see this here. Yeah, should be able to. Where the bearings ride here and here, that is where your main output gear rides. That's standard. Where it's different is from about right here on out. You can see here the wear pattern where the inner primary bearing rides. The dimension that Indian went with is to work with a standard metric bearing. Harley doesn't do that. Harley works with a press collar on this. And so there's a specific diameter that Harley runs, and that shaft approximately measures 0.9850, the Harley one, whereas the Indian one measures 0.9843. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, and it's not, but it's just enough, unfortunately. So when we measure this dimension here, I have my mic set, so it's just a measured fit, and this is set at the 9843. Now, if you try and, to illustrate this, if you try and slide it up the main shaft, you'll get to a point where it stops. Again, it's such a small difference, but it is important. And the reason why it's important is that you have to be aware of two things. One, you can't run a Harley Davidson in a primary bearing on your Indian. It's not a problem though, because it's a standard industrial bearing. It's nothing special. It can be bought from Indian or any bearing supplier. Honestly, it's not anything really too complicated, so not a bad thing. But if you have to rebuild your transmission, the only main shaft you can get now is the DD6 shaft from Baker, which is part number DD6-M8 main shaft, and that one here, excuse me, not M8MS, so it's DD6-MS main shaft. Readily available, not a problem. The problem we run into, again, when we run that, now we have to run a different inner primary bearing. The plus is that Indian was smart enough to use a bearing that still uses the same OD diameter as a common sourced Harley bearing. So what we run in this application is actually what Baker calls their high torque bearing. Basically what it is, it's an industrial bearing, so it has the same outside diameter, same thickness as the Indian bearing, and it's the same with the Harley bearing, but it has this special Harley Davidson ID. So it is a special bearing. It's not an off-the-shelf component from your industrial bearing supplier. So to recap, if you have to rebuild your transmission because the clutch ran too long and damaged the splines, or worn clutch ran too long and damaged the splines, you have to go to the Harley Davidson Dimension shaft. Though it is possible, and you also have to run the Harley bearing. So fairly simple, not an inexpensive fix. So again, check your clutches is really the best thing we can say. But I'll try and get a close-up shot here. This shaft is not the worst shaft, and hopefully that I can get that to focus. This one still has a lot of material packed into it, but you can see the wear in that, and it's especially noticeable at the very end. So if you look at the very end, try and get that to focus again, you will note it has a hooked look to the end of the spline. And so this one was replaced because of that. This transmission is actually worse, and I'm going to show you that close up here. This one, you can see it really exaggerated, that wear on that main shaft. Now, if you put a new clutch on this, what it will do is eventually rip out the splines on a new clutch. And we have had that happen. So this transmission assembly was replaced because they were unaware that we could figure out a solution. This was not done in our shop. This was done elsewhere. We ended up with this transmission though. It's rebuildable, but it's just a transmission that would have to be converted, unfortunately, to the Harley main shaft, which again, not the end of the world, but a little bit different than the standard setup. I will show you though what happens when you put a new clutch on a worn main shaft and continue to use the bike. Now this could happen to your regular clutch too, if you let it go long enough, but this was one that was worn. They replaced it, and then it failed completely. Now again, this could have happened if you had a just a regular clutch on a regular new shaft or original shaft, but you can see a very exaggerated failure here. There is no splines left in this. Customer complained that he thought his clutch was slipping. And well, I mean, technically it was. It was doing nothing. Let the clutch out, the bike didn't move. Surprisingly never made any weird sounds either. Customer never complained of any noise, just said he was riding the bike and then all of a sudden it stopped moving. So, again, check your clutches. Now, there is some compliance in the clutch. That is just the nature of the design, because these clutches do not tighten down to the shaft. How they actually tighten down is on the inside of them. This is the same with Harleys too. Let's see how nasty this thing is. You can see this washer here. This washer is where the bolt tightens down against. That washer actually floats. You can see it moving in there. When you tighten that down, what you're doing is you're actually bottoming this washer against the end of the main shaft right here. You're not tightening the hub into the splines. That's why this problem is such a big issue though, is because all Harley Davidson style clutches are not engineered to tighten into the spline. They're designed to float on the spline. Now that's fine as long as the hardness of the shaft and the hardness of the clutch hub are correct. Indian sourced a clutch hub, though of their own design, and that's not necessarily the problem. They sourced it from a very inexpensive manufacturer, and they didn't make it well. It's just too soft a material. The Rockwell hardness of it is too soft. Now I haven't tested what Rockwell it is. I can tell you though, it's not very hard. It's pretty soft. You take a flat file to it and slide it across that hub, you'll see it's pretty soft. And so it's bad metallurgy. It's just bad engineering. Oh, I should say bad manufacturing, maybe not bad engineering. So when you put a new clutch on, you may notice still that when you grab your clutch basket, it still has some compliance, still rocks. That's not bad. So I've had a couple customers that have installed a clutch themselves and said, hey, it's still loose. And that's not really the problem. It's only a problem if it's really exaggerated. But unfortunately, if it's really exaggerated, probably at that point you already have done damage to your shaft. So, more or less, the best thing you can do if you have a 2009 to 2013 Kings Mountain Indian is to replace your clutch assembly. It's a painful thing to do. It's expensive. They're upwards of $1,000. But doing all of this is much more expensive. It does require a Baker specific press tool. So you have to buy a special tool for pressing this cluster off of the shaft. It's not something I strongly advise, unless you need it, of course. So don't let it come to that. Try to check your clutches, replace them. We recommend a clutch from Baker. You can ask me for part numbers on that if you would like. We can source those clutches, of course, if so wanted. But definitely important to replace those clutches if you are at all suspecting it's an issue. And this isn't a mileage thing. We've seen them be loose as low as 15,000 miles. And this transmission here had, I want to say about 40,000 miles on it. So this actually had a fair amount of rounds. But it failed pretty spectacularly. And so, that being said, I don't want to ramble on here, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Again, we're here in West Fargo, North Dakota. Business name here is Sisu Fab, and we're on social media. You can reach us at sisufab@gmail.com. Phone number here is 701-367-2258. Again, that's 701-367-2258. Again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions on them. We got multiple years of experience on them, and also hoping to do a couple more videos here to bring people up to speed on some of the things we've learned through the years on them and things that we can do to make the bikes better and stand the test of time. Thanks.